Hello, everybody, whether it's your morning or afternoon. Also, thank you to Ray. Obviously, it's been great to support NewMR over the many years that we've been involved with Ray and to help develop the skills and the thought leadership within our wonderful research industry. So, I'm always delighted to have this opportunity to talk to everybody here and share some of the things that we've been doing and some of the new insights that we've uncovered. My name's Stephen Cribbett. I'm the founder and the CEO of Further. Some of you may know about us. We are the insight engine room for research and strategy teams in agencies and in brand teams around the world. And I'm joined on the call today by Nigel Roth, who's our research director. We'll talk a little bit more to Nigel towards the second half of the presentation, where he's going to take you through some of the work that we've been doing recently in and around this subject matter of the mindful consumer. So we're here really to talk about this new character, this new profile, if you like, this new person, this mindful consumer, and what we call the contradictions that we're seeing in the data and the research that we're running around this. And I think it's fair to say that, every week right now, whether you're reading online news or traditional newspapers or wherever you get your information from, we're hearing that people are more concerned than ever before about the survival of the planet, about social inequalities, and the fact that they don't trust brands, they don't trust politicians, they don't trust many of the institutions, they don't trust big tech companies. It seems it's something in the news almost every single day around that particular subject. And it's clearly having an impact on us as people, on our vulnerabilities. And there's some real burning considerations there for brands as well, in terms of how people are making more conscious decisions. And so just to call out a few bits of insight and some data here. So this is not collected by ourselves at Further, but from global data in this instance, and they found that 48% of consumers were making a conscious effort to buy less stuff. So this is what consumers were telling them in the surveys that they were running. So almost half of them were trying to buy less and be consciously doing so. Some other information, some data from Ipsos. On average, 70% of consumers globally say they're more worried about the environment now than they were a year ago. And I'm sure if we did this research in the last week with COP26 going on, that number would be even greater. And 72% of those surveyed agree that if ordinary people don't act now, there'll be a failing for future generations. So it's fairly daunting stuff when you read that. And you'd say, we're in this huge state of flux and things are changing. If you believe what the research industry and what the marketing industry are saying and everything that we have thrown at us on a day-to-day in the kind of news channels, things are changing furiously quickly. But I'm not sure that's really the reality. And again, I'm going to sort of call out some fantastic work done by Ipsos here. This is obviously not work from ourselves. And if you get a moment, I would certainly advocate popping over to YouTube, looking up Ben Page, CEO, and a great presentation he did there. I think it was for the MRS Awards recently, which was all about change. And there clearly is a bit of a contradiction going on here. We're hearing how concerned and how worried people are about the environment, about the social inequalities and social injustice. But the reality is, and what we're seeing is, number one, the change isn't happening as fast as we think. And Ipsos have done a fantastic job of going back over a number of decades and plotting how our values and our attitudes have changed. And actually, they've changed very little over those times. And this is just one chart I thought I'd pull out here. So when comparing household products of a similar quality and feature, unsurprisingly to us as researchers, the number one factor making that purchase, driving that purchase decision was money, cost, value. And sure enough, right at the bottom there was slightly higher than the kind of the hygienic packaging was, the products come in an eco-friendly packaging. So starting to see some contradictions in different data depending on what you're looking at. But we've been doing a lot of research ourselves recently, and particularly doing a lot of in-depth interviews with marketing directors of the top consumer brands here in the UK. And we coined this term, the mindful consumer, actually directly out of the words from their mouths. This mindful consumer was this new kind of character, this new profile that they were really grappling with and really having sleepless nights, trying to understand what their values were, what their behaviors were, what's different about them, and how do we remain relevant and connected to them. And so we started digging around a little bit and doing some research on the mindful consumer. We're more vulnerable. We have increasingly mindful of our own health and the well-being of our families and the planet we've talked about already. And we say that it's reshaping the way that we shop, the way that we eat, the way that we travel, and also what we expect from brands when they show up. And we kind of started to build these kind of pillars out, really, which is looking at what are the important things for the mindful consumer? What is it they're looking for in the brands that they give preference to? So, and then these are in no particular order. Number one, inclusive, so inclusive behaviors, not just in terms of how they conduct their marketing, but how do they treat their staff inside their organization? Authenticity and transparency, incredibly important now. I want to know where my product is being made, how it's being shipped to that store that I'm buying it from, how it's getting from the warehouse to my home. All of that information has to be clearly presented, and we have to believe it and trust in that information if we're going to give preference to those brands. Sustainability, and probably moving on from sustainability, this term regenerative. Actually, what are those brands and those organizations doing to give back to the earth that they've taken so much from over the years? And the final pillar there is this kind of customer centricity or customer led. And really what that means is they want to know that these brands and the organizations that they're giving preference to are taking full account and understanding what their needs and wants are. And it's not saying needs and wants have changed. I think the needs and wants are still very much the same, but they want to know that their organizations and the brands are built with a focus on the customer on the outside, then looking in, rather than based on kind of the financial and economic models first, and then customer needs and wants second. But, and you've probably heard this, subsequently the concerns are changing the way they shop. But are they? Are they really doing that? We've got this Seidu Gap which is starting to be talked about, and I have to say, I've seen it appear in column inches more in the last 6 months than I've ever seen it. So this Seidu Gap, the gap between the intention of behaving, consuming or shopping in a certain way and the reality of what we're seeing. So I'm hopeful most of you have heard of this Seidu Gap and you've talked to it before, but I thought I'd put a slightly light-hearted piece of research up in front of you is going to sort of illustrate this Seidu Gap. And again, fair play to Ipsos, they've done some great work here. This is a regular survey that they run, which looks at the frequency of sex amongst young people. And some great statistics there. When they asked, different genders, how often they thought the opposite gender or their gender were having sex versus the reality of what was actually taking place. The disparity was significant. So you can see there, the orange bars is the reality of what's going on. The grey bars of what they thought were going on either with their gender or the opposite gender. So, if you look at women's sexual activity in Great Britain, men thought that women were having sex 22 times in a 4-week period. The reality was it was 5. So you'll be pleased to know this isn't an interactive session today, so I'm not going to ask you about how often you're taking part, but I think it's a great illustration of what that Seidu Gap is. So what we decided to do is actually take a little bit of a deeper look at this and pull out one particular category and run some of the research ourselves to see what we could learn from it and what assumptions and what recommendations we could make. So I'm going to hand over to Nigel now, who's going to talk us through a piece of work that we did, which is called Keep It Clean.
Thanks, Stephen. I bet you're all very pleased that this is what we were talking about, and looking at cleaning products rather than sexual activity. So good, right. So what we did here is we thought a little bit about the cleaning category. And the reason we did that is because it's a category that has a lot of green and sustainable products in. But we know from a lot of research that we've done, and I've done particularly in the past, is that people say, yes, absolutely, I'm going to buy a green product next time I look for something to clean my surfaces. but they rarely do. So the real, it's a Seidu gap. It's a very clear one. Rather than uncover that gap, which we knew was already there, we looked at a way of maybe getting to how you could maybe understand it and also start to build some products that address that gap. And so we tried to understand a little bit more from a different perspective what this might look like. So thankfully, as part of our company further, we have a qualitative community platform that we use. So we use that with about 50 participants, all done in the UK, this one, not in the US, where a lot of our other work is done. We looked at asking those 50 people to do a number of activities, including taking photos of their cleaning closets under their sinks. We asked them to show us and describe products that they're very proud of. We asked them to do a little bit of trade-off between green products and other factors, and also created a framework for what makes a proud product, because we felt that that might be useful in reverse engineering into product development and communication. So let's have a look at what we did, and I'll take you through some of just the key slides. And I've only pulled out a few here because we don't have a lot of time, but I wanted to give you a flavor of it. So if any of you are old enough to remember Love Marks from Ogilvy, it was done quite a while ago. I remember being part of it, which tells you how old I am. But one of the things that they found very clearly was there was a correlation between brands that are doing very well and very successful and a high respect and a high love for those brands. And brands that got a high respect or high love score tended to thrive very well. So we wondered whether that could be used here to understand why green products aren't bought or why they are bought, and why other brands are bought. So we thought we'd go on and do a little bit of work to try to get to the bottom of it. So next slide. I'll just say next, Steve, and you can push on. So one of the things we asked people to do was take photos of their cleaning products. All right. So if you took photos of my cleaning products, I don't think it would be this comprehensive, but these are real photos from people's kitchens. As you can see, this person has a house I want to live in. Well, maybe I want to live in it. Do I want to live in it? It's very clean, but it might not be very healthy. And that was something that we looked at as well. Let's see what else we found. Next slide, thanks. So we asked people about the products that they used most based on some of the ones you just saw. And there was about 50 of those photos. I haven't shown you all of them. And we asked people to say, if you could describe that product, a product that really works well, a cleaning product that works well, that you would recommend to others, that you would talk to others about, what is a product that is optimal and works well? They came up with a whole bunch of words. We put those into a word cloud, and you can see two words right in the center: love and proud. And then this other one, me. Those are the biggest words that came out. Remember, we talked about love marks, and we talked also about high respect and high love. And we decided that there may be a correlation between love and pride, right? So it's a hypothesis, and that's where we got to. So we looked at this relationship and said, well, okay, maybe I don't love my car, but I'm proud of my car. Maybe I don't love my phone, but I'm proud of the one I chose. Maybe I don't love my cleaning products, but maybe I'm proud of them for some sort of reason. So we went on to ask them exactly what those reasons were. Thank you. We've got a few different things that came out of here. I pulled out one slide just to give you an idea of the kind of things we found. Now, these are UK brands. So if you're in the States, I saw a couple of people in LA and also Chicago, which is in fact my grandfather's hometown. So welcome from the Windy City. You will see that we have some UK brands, something like Brillo, which is a kind of a scrubbing thing, which scrubs your pans. We have Sillet Bang, which kills everything, not just germs, but everything. And some Marks and Spencer, which is a great British brand, some furniture polish. But one thing they said about these was there was a duality of ability, the strong and gentle at the same time. So that was one piece that we pulled out, the strong and gentle. And there were 4 other key criteria that seemed to make up what a proud product was. One thing to mention, of the 50 choices that people showed us of the brands they were proud of, there was one that was in fact somewhat green or sustainable or in any way environmental. That was a brand called Ecova. And that was the only photo. I pulled it out, just one out of 50 photos, not 50 brands or 50 products, but one out of those 50 photos, which shows you that although people want to do this, we tend not to. So the 5 criteria for proud products that we found, I'm just going to take you through very quickly. By the way, this deck, I can send you this deck later if you'd like. This is just a bit of a section of it. So you've got overperformance, right? So there's a lot of people talking about relative to expectation, there's an overperformance. And we wondered whether green products were actually claiming too high their performance ability. The next one is about this duality, which we talked about. Soft and strong but not abrasive, doesn't scratch but cleans perfectly, power without damage. And it's interesting, they talk about without damage. Is there a connection there that green products are maybe missing? Power without damage to the environment. It's just a very quick step, but maybe it's not being made now. The next one is multi-dimensionality, I think. And this talks about the idea that, and I'll give you a great example. My car failed its motor test to get back on the road because the headlights were too dull. And the guy at the garage said to me, don't go buy anything, scrub it with toothpaste. Okay, took me a day and a half, but it passed. And there's a multi-dimensionality to some of these products that people seem to enjoy. You know, it smells great, cleans well, leaves a shine, it's just perfect. A lot of fragrance, a lot of power, got things clean. So there's a whole bunch of different things that these brands seem to be doing well at. There's also relativity place as well, which is, this is a relativity between what something costs and what it actually does. And we've all been in that place before. When you buy something, it's not just about the price, it's about what the thing does for the price. And then you start to balance those up. It's something that we do in our brains without really thinking about it, but it might be something here that is a balance that maybe green products aren't getting quite right. And there was one more, I think, Stephen, after that, right? Which is what we call folly, which is the fear of losing it. In all the cases of proud products, people said, I'm scared of not having this, I'm afraid of losing it, or I don't know what I would do without it. I couldn't live without my scrubbing bubbles or something. So there was a real fear of losing out. So we had 5 key criteria for proud products, which we were able to establish. We also asked people a whole series of questions, and I mentioned this at the beginning of this trade-off piece, where we said things like, you know, if it was expensive but good for the planet, if it was harmful but cheap, and all these different trade-offs. This is just one, and again, there's quite a few others in there as well, but I thought you'd like this one. A product you like using that is overperforms, duality, multidimensionality, you don't want to lose it. So a proud product, but it isn't green, or a product that is green but isn't one of your proud choices, it isn't a proud product. And you can see very clearly that people make a choice where pride trumps green every time. So our hypothesis was, you know, certainly pride is an important part of it. We'd like to explore it even more. We thought this was quite a good start. One of the ideas about research when you're doing this kind of stuff, and what we did is we started with a hypothesis which was non-green related. Because if you go in and you ask people questions about, you know, I just did a project on green energy, and I ran a couple of virtual focus groups, quite a few. And in one of them, I said, you know, what is the biggest barrier to you not choosing to switch to a green energy supplier? And pretty much across the whole group, the whole 6 people in there, they said they just don't have time to do it. There's not enough time in the day. And they went on. And they spent an hour and a half telling me this, which just shows you how this stuff works. So avoid questioning where consumers can reason things, give them something like a community or some different kind of questions where they can get to it without that kind of layer. And then reverse engineer into a framework so you can start to construct optimal products based on products that people are proud of, or products that are optimal, or that they like the way they work. And then maybe you can come back into that from a different direction. So I think that's the key stuff. I wanted to just share with you a few slides of that to begin with. I think, Stephen, you have one more slide to share.
Yeah, thanks, Nigel. And just put in here as well, because a lot of what we're talking about here is behavior change. You know, the Seidu Gap exists. We know it. We've uncovered that, and we've seen how pride trumps, you know, those in the instance of sustainability and household cleaning products, pride seems to be trumping it. But the behavior change, we put a couple of recommendations here for marketers as well, you know, so making the future more tangible in order to change our kind of default responses and try and reward the long term as opposed to that kind of more immediate response and reward that you get from purchasing those products. So that's something that needs to be worked out. So minimize the effort to make a different choice and change products. Now, we can share examples of actually where that's been done and doesn't work in isolation. So, Nigel used that example, but if you think of financial services and banking, it's very easy to switch account now, and millions of pounds have been invested in making that happen, and the legislation is there as well. But very few people are actually doing it. So it's something that needs to be used alongside other nudges to change that behavior. And then the third recommendation there is perhaps to focus on the impact of change at a more individual level rather than at a collective level. So it becomes much more relevant to the individual, the person who's choosing the products and spending that money as well. And finally, a slightly unusual looking slide, because we thought this was something we learned about through the course of some of this research that we've done, and this was some desk research. But there is actually a classification of sexuality called ecosexuals, and apparently they make love to the earth and they can get married to the sun and the moon. We thought that was a nice, humorous way of ending today's presentation. And then I think we've got some time now for Q&A.